Okay, well, thank you very much. I know this was a lot of work, and we'll look forward to getting that sheet, but I appreciate it. Thank you. We will now move to F3, first reading of selected, replaced, revised, and deleted board policies and administrative regulations in the 4000 series.
Well, you don't know how eager Jerry Fawcett is to be here tonight
So
and
glad to
work
be
with you
here.
on these policies.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we have a full review of the 3,000 policies, thanks to, I'm sorry, 4,000 policies. Thanks to Jerry Fawcett's work and the work of the department. And they're before you tonight for your input.
Did you want to say something
I
before
would,
we
I
dive
would
in?
just like to say that I believe the board looked at these first on February of 2010. And so this is just a review and an updating of what we have done since that time. And there have been some changes in the ed code, so that's why they're coming back to you this evening.
Okay, thank you. Well, in the past, what we've done is just kind of go down the line, and whenever anyone has one they'd like to pull, we do that. So why don't we start, and shall we start at page 92?
92, yeah.
And move from there. Does anyone have anything from 92 to 102? Ms. Parker?
Well, if we want to go in order, does anybody have anything on page 92? No. Then for me, my first one is on page 94, just in the non-discrimination and employment paragraph, where there is a long list, language isn't on that, and I would suggest that we add language.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that for me?
Add the word, at any district site, we prohibits discrimination against and or harassment of district employees and job applicants at any district site or activity on the basis of actual or perceived race, religion, color.
Yes.
And I would add the word language in there.
Was this list a legally circumscribed?
Well, it's from
Described in the list?
CSBA, and
Uh-huh.
of course it aligns with the ed code.
But we can presumably add in.
Some things, not others.
I think usually if there's an ed code in that, on that particular wording, it's right below it.
It's in.
And I don't see it here.
I see,
So presumably we can add it, but we'll
Okay.
check.
I will check for you.
May I ask for clarification? This is non-discrimination in employment. Does that mean that if we give a preference for people who are fluent English speakers, that would be discriminatory?
I don't, well, I think it would depend, because it would mean that if somebody spoke English and Spanish, that you're
Yes.
not going to, or English and Turkish, or Turkish is their primary language, but they speak English with an accent, that is not something that we would discriminate on the basis of. I mean, there would be primary needs to speak the language of instruction if we're talking about, or language of the workplace.
Yes.
Well, and actually that has come up recently with regard to the desire of one of the departments to hire someone who was Spanish-speaking only because of the level of a job that they would be doing. It would be a kitchen position. And the policy of this district, and I don't know whether it's written policy because I'm not that familiar with your policies, but is that we only hire English-speaking individuals who can speak to us in English. Now, we have many employees, especially in our classified group, who their primary language is Spanish, but they communicate well enough in English to be understood and to understand, the simple things that they need to be understanding. So this is an interesting discussion.
It is, I didn't know it was quite so relevant.
It is.
Well, and I guess I have a question with that, because if we did put language in there, would then it backfire on us if we had to hire someone who was bilingual, for example, or,
You're right.
and someone said I was discriminated upon because I'm not multilingual?
I can't answer that question.
So, I mean, something to think about, I just,
Okay. I can certainly
Could-
research it for you.
If you can research that and maybe
Sure.
tie it in with, do we have a policy about
Mhm.
employees having to speak English, even if it's in a capacity where it wouldn't be necessary, it might be helpful if they didn't?
I will do so.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything in that vicinity? Shall we move forward then? Well, let me put it this way, what is the next page number that someone has a comment on?
It's 124.
And not to 136.
Okay, let's go to 124 then.
This is a new board policy on the temporary athletic team coaches. And my concern on this was about the new activity supervisor clearance certificate.
Yes.
And obviously, we had exchanges about this, and,
Right.
and Dr. Sarvis and I have had exchanges about this. I guess my first concern is that until this board policy is passed, our board policy is in place. And I want to be careful that we're not acting without having board-approved policy.
Yes.
And also, this board policy is only for athletic team coaches. So it only affects high school athletic team coaches.
Actually, I believe it also affects anyone who works with students in a school-sponsored activity, i.e. band, theater.
And that could be, and maybe we need board policy addressing it, but that's not in this board policy. And so if there's desire for it to apply beyond high school athletic coaches, then we need to find a board policy for that to fit into. My concern with it is that the new law did not require that employees go out and get the activity supervisor clearance certificate. There was a choice.
Yes.
They could either do that, or a district could make that policy, or they could make the policy that they go and get an FBI clearance and a Department of Justice clearance. And essentially, with the certificate, it means that instead of just, they take the exact same information, it's the same DOJ and FBI background check. It just goes to the state instead of to us, and we pay about double the money, something like that.
It's about $120.
And so, I guess my concern with it, especially if we pay for it, is what are we getting for that amount of money? And I think that there's the idea of it, in terms of liability, it's easier if you point to a piece of paper that the state has printed, although it's the exact same information that we would have gotten from the DOJ and FBI. And so I think in terms of cost and protocol, it's just something that we need to talk about. I think it's reasonable to do it, but it is gonna cost us more.
You're right. When AB 1025 was passed in October of '09, it was basically specifically for head coaches and school-sponsored events, and then it was broadened to include all who work with other students, and that turned into AB 346. You're right when you make the statement that this, what we have here in front of you, is only about athletic team coaches. However, the Assembly bill does talk about the fact that this is for anyone who is working with students in a school-sponsored activity. So I will bring some more information back and correct what we brought to you today. There were two options, you're correct. There was the FBI DOJ criminal check, or the ASCC, which is what we're bringing to you here this evening. There was a deadline, and it had to be implemented before hiring began in September. And so at that point in time, with the passage of this Assembly bill, we all of a sudden had in front of us the requirement to do one or the other. We consulted legal counsel, and legal counsel felt that the safest way for students and to protect students was to go with the ASCC. It is the same information. I believe the difference is how it is then reported back to the district. And we do not know that through the FBI, we will get subsequent arrest records. Presently, in the office, Ann Peak receives I believe it's twice a month. It's a bulletin that comes from the Department of Justice, and that is basically the state agency. And they indicate to us any of our employees who have been arrested or who have had other criminal activity that we may need to know about. Some of it doesn't affect their job at all, but it is just a report that comes out that one of our employees may have had a DUI, okay? It's an automatic reporting system that comes through the state. We do not know at this point in time whether the FBI is set up to get that kind of information back to school districts. We know that the DOJ does it through the CTC, the Teacher Certification, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So we know we get the information that way, and the purpose of this bill, according to our research, was that they did not want someone moving from state to state and have a criminal activity, let's say someone who had a child abuse charge or a kidnapping charge, let's say, in Colorado, moves to California, and we don't know anything about that. And we will not know anything about that unless we run a check and run it through the CTC. The CTC gets the FBI report. And I'm not sure how all of this works yet, but we do know that we don't get anything from the FBI. And at this point in time, the FBI has said that they are not set up to do so. So in our mind, the safest way to go was to require the ASCC. So that's why the choice was made.
And I understand that, but I think that we're always, I mean, we've had many board meetings over the fall, and it's always, if there's an urgency matter, fine, just to bring forward a single policy rather than doing the whole series. And I think I would have preferred to see that so that we were following board policy rather than just running ahead with it. I think that the reason we see this only for the athletic team coaches is the CSBA has not done an update for policies that include other categories of employees that might fall under this, or they haven't created a separate policy, which may be necessary instead of it falling under an umbrella, because most of our employees are going to fall in one of the other categories anyway. But I appreciate your information about it, and I would just suggest that in the future that we just try to hit something like that earlier at the board level. But it does sound like it's a good idea to go with the ASCC. And I don't know, I guess one of my other questions for you is the plan for us always to pay for it in the future?
No, this would be an employee cost. It has been so far. Although it's interesting, it's been, and this is a good question, I'm glad you bring it up. Some of the athletic departments have foot the bill for this ASCC. The AD has found money in order to have somebody come out and do the fingerprint and then submit the fees for that. However, we also have individuals who may be doing a theater production who have come in and they have had to foot the bill themselves. So we have kind of a double standard going at this point in time about who is, I believe some of them are footing the bill. I don't know of anyone who's doing like that, like for example, the DP play. I know that individual had to come in and pay for this application. So again, it brings up the question on how we handle this in personnel. You know, is this something that the district is going to pay for? Or is this something that each individual employee should be paying for? And of course, that's not my decision, that would be up to you.
Well, we learned a lot in that.
Well,
question.
and I
Thank
guess
you.
that is something that we might want to put into the board policy, who pays for it.
I agree, because
Good point.
if the athletic departments are paying, I mean, some of their funding is ASB funding, so I would be a little concerned about where that money might be coming from, so.
I understand.
At any rate, definitely something to pursue. Okay, I had something on page 129, unless anybody had anything before that. And it was a question, under retired district employees who shall be permitted to enroll in the health and welfare dental plans. We don't really call out at whose expense, talking about expense here. And so I'm just wondering if we should be doing that, if we should say at their own expense or at our expense, or, because I'm assuming it's at their expense, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Although we have offered incentives, and we still have people on some of those incentives who are being paid at our expense.
That's true.
Covered it.
That's true, and that's what triggered the thought in my mind, but the way this is written, someone could retire without those provisions as part of their retirement and then come back and ask to be covered, correct?
But so you're wanting to make sure that who is going to be paying for that insurance coverage, that is delineated here?
It seems to me that would be a reasonable expectation.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Hearn, I think you had one in the 130s.
Mine was just a question, not, on page 136. I'm just curious, on unused sick leave can accumulate without limitation. Unused days of sick leave shall be accumulated from year to year without limitation, 136.
Yes.
Do we have a lot of employees that have a ton of sick leave?
Yeah, we do.
And do they cash that out when they leave?
They don't cash it out, it accrues
It's
towards your retirement.
Retirement,
Okay.
STRS.
Right, and if you transfer to another district or
It
community
transfers.
college, it transfers.
Yes.
Okay, so that's not a burden over our head?
No.
Okay.
It's not a
No.
liability.
Do we have any other questions?
I actually have a question on that though. On the unearned sick leave that you're able to use for an extraordinary circumstance. So if someone comes in and is fairly new, they can use up to 5 months of unearned, or,
Ask me the question one more time.
so for the unearned sick leave,
Are you on 136?
136, sorry, 136,
Okay.
and I'm looking, under the unearned sick leave that you're able to use towards sick leave. So the max that was put in there was 5 months, correct? Am I?
Could you tell us which line you're on?
Well,
Sorry,
it's
which
kind of,
paragraph?
it's the whole thing,
It's
I'm actually,
embedded
yeah, it's
throughout.
embedded throughout, and it was part of the little summary, so up to,
136 deals only with the use of sick leave when there's an industrial injury under workers' compensation.
okay,
So that's when you see the 5-month differential
the
on
5
things.
months, okay.
That's correct.
thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I have, if I could jump in on page 139, unless I'm taking somebody's thunder here. On 139, I need to make some changes. Under bereavement, employees are entitled to leave of up to 5 days, and then strike, or 5 days if out-of-state travel is required. We are aligning this with Ed Code. We missed this as we were.
So could you read first the
Yes.
corrected line? then?
So it would say, employees are entitled to a leave of up to 5 days upon the death of any member of the employee's immediate family. That's the way that first sentence would read. And then down underneath where you have numbers 1, 2, and 3, members of the immediate family include. We would like to add under number 2, the employee's spouse, domestic partners would be the addition there. And those would be the only changes.
Good, okay. Do we have any other changes, comments, or questions? Looks like we don't.
You mean that's it? Perfect.
Thank you very much.
I will work on this and I will bring back changes and/or answers to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Foster. That moves us to F4, process and timeline for implementation of fiscal year 2011-12 budget reductions.
And Derek Smith will present this.
Thank you. Based on our first interim report, I was paid a visit by the county education office, who was in my office last night. And obviously, they're very interested in how we're gonna make our reductions, and I talked to them about our process and timeline. And as a result of that discussion, they want the board-approved list of expenditure reductions prior to the submission of the second interim. So my timeline has to be moved back, that's why I pulled the budget development calendar that also has similar dates here. So when you look at this particular item, based on our discussion with the county education office, we'd really be looking at a first reading of the fiscal solvency plan phase 5 on February 22nd and a second reading on March 8th, which we simultaneously submitted at the time that the first or the second interim report would be adopted. Yeah.
I think it's February 25th is our.
Is it February 25th? I thought it was 22nd, so whatever that date is. So it would be the 25th of February and the 8th of March. Tuesday night. Oh, it's the 22nd.
It is, I'm sorry, February, I'm thinking January,
Yeah,
sorry.
I did have it right.
Sorry, you're right.
So it's important that we establish that timeline so we can adhere to it. You know, and I would imagine that we'd also have to be doing any noticing at that same meeting on March 8th. But we'd have an idea of what kind of programmatic reductions we would be making, so I think we could do that.
Mrs. Parker.
I guess there are so many scenarios for this spring that which one, because there's with unification, without unification, there's the governor's budget, there's the governor's budget if the taxes pass it, the governor's budget if the taxes don't pass, and then a complete unknown.
Yeah, I would think, we had a little bit of discussion about that, and, you know, the industry standard is that we would follow whatever the governor's budget is as it's revised at the May revise, as it's revised at the state adopted budget. The opening salvo from the governor is that he's not gonna cut K-12 education. So we have to proceed on that basis. Obviously, unification is not guaranteed in the time frame that we need it. So I would think we would proceed with the $5.6 million as the target and have our work done and complete by March 8th. In the event that the electorate does not extend those temporary taxes in June, we'll be revisiting things, hopefully with at least the benefit of having the unification completed. However, I did paint that worst case scenario earlier in the evening. If that was the case, we'd be making more revisions probably in the middle of summer.
I guess that I would, in a way, I would like to be looking at both at the same time at the board, because the public, you know, whatever we give to the county, it may be that Plan B has to go to the county, but that we would have a Plan A so that the community knows that if unification waivers go through, we will automatically step.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, our plan will be couched in the event that certain things occur that we can pull back, and we can pull back fairly quickly. Obviously, the scenario that I painted earlier where, let's say the waivers are granted in advance of the county committee completing their work, and let's say the county committee completes their work in April, we'd know, we'd have certainty at that point in time. What we don't know is the June election outcome.
And I guess my one other question is, we've had many millions worth of budget cuts that we've had to make in the past, we've done it every year. Why is the county asking for us to push this forward?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. If you look at it from their perspective, is that we got 5.6, they're probably looking at the worst case scenario. What if everything goes south on them? And if you're a county office, you're gonna basically paint, or you're gonna build an audit trail. And frankly, one of their concerns is, you're gonna have a brand new superintendent, you've got a lot of things that are up in the air. And if you look at, FICMAT's fiscal indicators or criteria and standards, if you look at any of those indicators, when you have multi-year deficit spending, declining enrollment, change in superintendent, you look at all these factors, that makes them nervous.
I would just say that I think we need to constantly remind the public that the importance of this election, in fact,
Absolutely.
because, they hear no cut K through 12, and, hopefully that connection is made, but, this 5.6 million is staring us right in the face.
And I will add, just to address Board Member Parker's concern, when they came over, we asked them point blank, well, are you here to change our certification? And they said, no, we're not gonna do that, but here's our concerns. And they wanna see us act early rather than late, because if things don't pan out the way we want, and, we don't cut the 5.6, and the electorate doesn't extend those, then we're in a deep, deep hole. I don't know what $2 billion in cuts across K-12, translates to on a per pupil or per ADA basis, but I'm sure it's significant. And you multiply that per ADA unit times our 13,400 ADA or whatever we might have, it's gonna be a chunk. So they don't want us to dig ourselves in a hole that we can't get out from underneath. Hopefully we're not looking at that scenario. Hopefully everything's, goes the other way.
I would think that if you just aimed at the 5.5 million, as we see the list, those items that could quickly be reversed could be highlighted. But we need to face the fact of 5.5 or 5.6 million, period. And if everything else turns great, then we would reverse most of them probably.
I'm particularly concerned about layoffs. The specter of layoffs is always uncomfortable, it's always painful. Yet, if we are forced to make cuts, we will have had to make those layoff decisions in February, at the beginning of February, so that we have those notices out to people once again. And, in the end, it sometimes seems foolish that we had to go through all of that, but if we had to act on those layoffs and act on those cuts that involve layoffs, then we would need to have those in place early in February.
We do have one public comment on this. Mr. Lane Wheeler.
Thank you, Wayne Wheeler, President SBTA. SBTA respects the board's responsibilities to act in a fiduciary responsible way on this matter. We would encourage you to be as proactive as you can, because I'd like to say great minds think alike and put myself in the same category as Dr. Sarvis, but I'm not sure I deserve that praise yet. But he was going right where I was going with my comments, and that is that the RIF process, having gone through it 6 years and watched the devastating qualities that it has, not only on teachers, but on students and families and programs, that if we can do anything to mitigate that in an expedient fashion so that folks leave for summer break knowing they have jobs, I would encourage the board to take that action. We know that you have to move forward on this parallel course with the unification going forward also. We are doing our very best to make sure that we are active and involved in that unification process. Our rep council is meeting on Thursday with Mr. Smith to take action on that, and we're hoping that it would be a supportive action. And we will be working with our colleagues in the other feeder districts to make sure they're in support. And we're doing our part, but we certainly would request that you can do, if there's anything you can do to stave that point of contention there that's going to be devastating, we would ask you to do it. So with that, thank you.
Ms. Limon?
Going back to something that Mrs. Parker said, is there any way that we can look at simultaneous budgets, in part for the benefit of the public to know that there is something else we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Meg and I were talking about, we can show you on a, like at the second interim report, or even before that, you know, on a multi-year basis, here's what it looks like with the unification, here's what it looks like without. I mean, what we don't know is the outcome of the June election. And part of the problem is that not only do we not know it, nobody's even quantified what that might look like, so.
I guess for me, and maybe other board members feel the same way, I don't wanna be in a situation where we make 5.6 million in cuts, and then we don't need to cut, maybe we need to cut 2 million,
Right.
maybe we don't need to cut anything. You know, somewhere in the range, the unification goes through, best case scenario with the governor's budget, taxes pass. I don't wanna then be scrambling to decide if it, you know, what goes back if we don't have to cut as much. I would rather have that planned at the same time that we are planning what the cuts are, so that we prioritize them and know what would come back first if the funding were there.
And I think we could do that as part of our normal process, but that's really kind of your job to prioritize what would come back, so we might be starting at 3:30 that day.
It would be a long meeting, but, you know, obviously we would need your recommendations.
I agree, and I know it's a lot of work, but obviously I think we have to do that. And it would be really nice if everything turns up rosy and then we can undo, you know, the projected layoffs and all those kinds of things in a rapid fire way.
Yeah, I will tell you, one of the complicating factors there is that, you know, in any kind of budget cutting scenario, you know, there's trade-offs. And our process is always to identify more expenditure reductions than what you have to make. So in the process of arriving at the number, you're gonna be trading off, and then we go to the process of what gets restored first. I'm just explaining how complex this is gonna be, so. I'm not saying it can't be done, I'm just letting you know.
But
That's the
as you
issue.
said, by April, we might know where we
We
were in
could know,
unification.
we could know, but we will have to have the cuts, they want a board approved
Sure.
list of cuts by March 8th.
Right.
But what we could have is an internal document, if this all occurs, what comes back first, you know, first tier, second tier, third tier, or, you know, whatever method we decide to use.
Okay, well, I know we'll all be working together on that one. Okay. Thank you very much. I guess we can move, we have no consent agenda items to return to, so,
Yeah, we do.
oh, we do?
The one that was.
Oh, the one that was pulled, I'm sorry.
D15.
I thought it was gone forever. Okay, Yeah,
No,
okay.
it's pulled and modified.
I see, all right. Well, then let's return to D15.
And as you will see, if you go down the left-hand margin on the completion dates, the first reading and second reading of the fiscal solvency plans have to be realigned with the dates we just discussed.
So that's the second, March 8th,
Yes.
that would be changed to February 22nd, and the one that currently says March 22nd would be
more.
changed to March 8th.
That's correct, that's correct.
I've already made those changes, I've already put them on the future agenda item list.
Okay, so we can't go ahead and approve that now then?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm hoping.
I'll move
Okay.
to approve the modified item D15, which was the adoption of the 2011-12 budget development calendar.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, no. A new budget calendar. Okay, so now we will move to coming events. Does anyone have something they'd like to put on our radar? Looks like not. Future agenda items. Mrs. Parker.
I do have one. We had the district's youth violence prevention committee meeting yesterday. And we had deputies Hadley and Hunter from San Marcos and Dos Pueblos High School respectively. And as an aside, I will say thank you so much to Sheriff Bill Brown for making those resources available for our campuses and for the larger community. But they brought up something that I was not aware of, and the secondary administrators that were there chimed in on it, and that was that, in fact, they strongly believe that the board's change from a two-strike drug possession on campus before you're up for expulsion policy, when we switched that from 2 strikes to 3 strikes, that it has not had a positive effect on their campuses. It's had a negative effect. I would need to know a lot more information before I even speculated on that, and we may want to bring that back to the board as part of a larger discussion about drug enforcement policies, drug and alcohol enforcement policies, and what plans we have in place or what we might bring forward to try to improve the situation for our students.
I have something as well. I think in December, the topic of truancy came up, and so I definitely want to make sure that that's on our radar and we have a greater discussion about truancy.
Okay, all right, Mr. Herring?
No.
No, okay. All right, well then I think